Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
2 certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only 2 best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go.
So we're interviewing an expert today, and it's a fellow client / friend / coach. And I feel like we've had a lot of those. And I want to make sure people know that we don't only coach people who then go off and become coaches.
Yeah, so
it might seem that way if you only listen to our podcast.
Marissa was my client 2.5 years ago, and then she expressed interest in becoming a coach, which makes sense because if you are attracted to the idea of becoming a coach, you're probably interested in being coached. It kind of goes hand in hand. So it was funny, though, when she asked me about it and we started talking about it, her boyfriend at the time asked her, is this like one of those things where people just convert you and she's just trying to make you into a coach because she doesn't know what else to do or something like that? Which honestly, I did not fault him.
Fair question.
Because I think that there are actually a lot of pyramid type scheme things out there where the only thing they know how to do is exactly what they did.
Sure.
And
that
so,
definitely exists. But that
to ease her and his fears about that, I actually looked up how many clients at the time I'd had and then how many of them had actually gotten trained as coaches. And it was a very, very small percentage of them. It was like 2% or something like that. So
we just happened to bring a lot of them onto the podcast.
Well, but that just makes sense, is now I know all these coaches.
And now they're experts in certain things.
Right. So I think this checks out.
Yeah, it does. Just wanted to put that out there in case you were like, this seems suspicious.
I mean, we're also like the judge and jury for ourselves. But like, again, this podcast is not a democracy. This podcast is a tyranny. We both know who the tyrant is.
So do you want to talk about who this actual person is now that we've given that?
Well, yeah, you can read her bio if you want.
Okay. Marissa Burdett is the certified life and career coach behind Ampersand Coaching and the host of the Permission to Pivot podcast. Through personalized coaching, podcast episodes, and other offerings, she helps creative, ambitious women get unstuck so they can move forward in their careers and lives with a renewed sense of confidence and clarity. Join Marissa in the Permission to Pivot Facebook community, where an intimate group of like-minded folk gather to connect with, support, and empower one another to make a place for exactly who they are in work and in the world.
We will link to that, by the way. Yeah. And we will be back at the end, of course, and we'll talk more about all of the things that she has to offer that, and we'll obviously link to them all. We got into lots of things on this podcast, but the theme is just exactly what her podcast is about, which is Permission to Pivot. That's the title of her podcast. And we talk about basically probably 5 to 6 or so of the most common fears and misconceptions and hangups people have around making, I think, what I would consider to be a major career pivot. Like changing to a different industry or
starting a business or
major things that
going back to school.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So she has some really good thoughts and ideas, and she created this list based on the things she hears her clients say the most. And when I looked at it, I was like, yep, this checks out. So I hope that you guys get a lot of value out of this, and we'll be back at the end to wrap things up, as always.
All right.
Hey, Marissa.
Hey.
Hey, ladies. How are you?
Good. We're excited to have you on.
I feel that this is a great day because it's sunny and 70 degrees outside, and we're talking to Marissa. So what really could it more have, asked for in life?
It's like a perfect afternoon.
It's so perfect.
Yeah, we're spending inside with the windows and the blinds closed.
Yeah, pretty much.
So they've already heard who you are because we, had a little bit of an intro. So I want to just jump right in to asking you, because I think this is going to be the theme of our conversation. I think it is now. God knows, in an hour, it could have ended up being something totally different.
It might meander.
But you have a podcast called Permission to Pivot, and that's kind of your deal. So I want you to tell people just right off the bat, what does permission to pivot actually mean?
Yeah, that's an awesome question to start with. Yeah, so I do have a podcast called Permission to Pivot. And for me, it kind of was born out of seeing that so many people are suffering because they don't feel like they can be themselves or that they can make a change that's going to allow them to show up more as themselves, whether that's in work or in a relationship or whatever. And I think that that's something that we're really craving collectively right now, is feeling like we can do the things that we've always wanted to do or be whoever we want to be, who we truly are. And so this podcast and kind of just this idea around permission to pivot, it's really about finding that permission within yourself, because I think that we also look towards other people and organizations and people in authority roles to tell us what to do, or even mentors, for example, to guide us. And really that needs to come from within. And sometimes that is challenging and it's hard. And so those are kind of the conversations that I like to dig into a bit more, about some of the fears or the beliefs that we have that hold us back from giving ourselves permission to make those changes. And I'm excited that we get to dig in a bit more about that today.
Well, you're right that the permission to pivot has to come from within. A lot of times we feel almost like we're waiting for someone else to give us permission, or waiting for someone else to say, you can do this, or that would be okay, or you'd be really good at this. But there's so much inside of ourselves that we won't even let ourselves look at other options, much less consider making that kind of a change, whether it's career or whatever else, like you said. So, okay, I'm sure there's a lot of ways that people will hold themselves back from giving themselves that permission. But tell us some of the most common ones, and then we'll dig into them a bit.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest ones has to do with other people, and whether that's the fear of disappointing someone else, like your parents or even your colleagues, if you're contemplating like a career shift, or the guilt that comes from putting those individuals maybe in a tough place if you would decide to make a change or to leave your job. A lot of times I hear, and these are things that I've also thought about, in my roles and in career and things like that, is, I'm worried that I'm letting my parents down because, they have supported me. They have made this possible for me to, have this job or to live where I live. And if I change, if I give that up, I might be letting them down, or I might disappoint them in some way. And that can be really tough, especially when it's people you really care about and that people who have supported you to get to where you are. Same thing with like your boss. If you happen to have a supervisor or a mentor, or somebody who has really championed you in that role or given you opportunities, and you decide that you want a different opportunity, or if you would be leaving them at a critical point in a project or something like that, I think that that is one that can have a lot of hold over us and a lot of power over us. And, we start to think through, like, if I were to make this change, what's that relationship going to be like? How is that going to change? And am I okay with what that could look like?
I have had clients stay in jobs for years because they didn't want to let down their coworkers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay, I know you asked her, I'm going to change the game on the fly. I know you asked her to like give some examples and then we can dive into them, but I feel like I want to dive into this one while it's hot. Let's just do it. So, okay, I know Kristen and I have our opinions, but this is not it is our space, but this is your space too.
All of our space together.
To give your take on how you address this with people, because this is such a big reason that people don't make change, is because the guilt that they feel and the disappointment that they think other people are going to feel if they make some sort of big change. So how do you tend to address this with people?
Yeah, there are a couple of good like coaching questions that I think could come into play here. But I think the first one really is, asking yourself, like, what does your parent or your colleague or your boss, or whomever this person is that you have in mind, what do they want for you? Like, what do they ultimately want for you? And chances are, I'd imagine that you might say they want you to be happy, or they want you to be successful, or to make a good living, whatever that might be. And you can kind of follow up to that, like, how would they feel if they knew that they were a barrier to that thing?
Oh, that's
that
a
they
good
were
question.
kind of, inhibiting you from your happiness or from success.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you kind of put it in that way, you start to realize, whoa, I'm putting a lot of pressure on these people, and they ultimately just want what's best for me. And who gets to decide that but me?
Yeah. This brings up a conversation I was having with a client the other day. She was really afraid to tell her dad that she was actually going to do coach training for, she was going to go to IPEC, what we are all familiar with.
Yes.
And she was really afraid to tell her dad because I think that his value is around normalcy and like 9-to-5 jobs. And coaching is something that he's not very familiar with. And I think it probably stimulates a lot of fear in him about her not being safe and cared for and all of that. And so she really didn't know how to tell him in a way that he would be receptive to and that he wouldn't shut her down and like sort of dismiss her dreams. And leaving like a well-paying job to become a coach is something that scares a lot of parents. And so what I told her that I would like I think this would be cool to have your take on this. I told her, ask him, what is it that he values about you as a person? Because he's not going to say the amount of money you make. He's not going to say how impressive you are. Because you're his daughter, he's going to say, well, I love your sense of humor. I think you're really smart. I think you're really compassionate. He's going to give you things about yourself that are deep kind of character things. And then what I want you to say is, I am leaving my job so that I can be more of that person that you value.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Ooh, it's hard to fight with that, isn't it?
Yeah, right? You can't come after that and say like, oh, but you need to stay where you are.
Right. I also think it's important to challenge how much of what you assume other people are thinking or feeling is your interpretation.
Yeah.
Because I've quit jobs where I was stressing out leading up to me giving my notice, thinking, oh my God, they're going to think that I'm just the worst and they're going to be so upset. And they're happy for me. I mean, of course they're disappointed, but they're like, that's a great opportunity. You should definitely do that. And it's fine. So it was all this misinterpretation that I built up in my head about what their reaction was going to be. And it wasn't that at all. So you could be stopping yourself from making a change about something that is actually never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Giving, people a chance to react the way that they want to react rather than the way that you assume that they're going to react.
Yeah. Okay. What's your take on letting down coworkers? Because Kristen and I are in the habit of telling people, if you're not winning at your job, then you're actually not helping anybody else win. Like your teammates would be better off with someone who's genuinely excited to fill that role that you're leaving behind. And you're doing that person who's about to take your job a solid because they might actually be a lot more pumped about that job than you are. It's like a win all around.
Yeah.
So how do you approach that?
Yeah, and I completely agree with your perspective on that. I think that, sometimes you might actually be leaving your colleagues in a difficult situation, but what if that's the exact situation they need to be in? And who are you to deny them that opportunity to grow and to like recalibrate and to figure out a new way forward? Maybe they needed that push in the right direction or that chance to reevaluate, their values or the direction that you're going. And if you stay and you prolong the status quo, that change can't happen.
Hey, Marissa, did you watch the Netflix documentary about the Fire Festival?
I sure did.
Oh, girl. Okay. So do you know that part at the end where the guy who, I don't remember what his job was, but he was going to teach yoga classes. Like that was what he was going to do at the Fire Festival.
Yes.
He said, in hindsight, we really should have just let it fail because what happened was we kept fixing just enough problems that it kept not dying. But yet it got to this point where these terrible things happened. And if we had just let it burn down and walked away, we would have prevented this even worse thing from happening. And I really think that that's what happens when you assume that like struggle is necessarily a bad thing, or that failure is necessarily a terrible outcome to avoid at all costs. Sometimes you might actually be enabling instead of allowing a necessary change to happen that might happen if you walked away and made a pivot that you really feel called to do.
Right. And who knows, you could be inspiring to do the same. You know, so many other people might be in the same boat thinking, oh, man, I need to make a change, but they're afraid. And, you can kind of be that person to lead the way. Not saying that everyone needs a max exodus, which we talked about in my podcast, everyone leaving at the same time. But I think that it can really help inspire and empower other people to do the changes, to make the changes that they need to make.
That's helped a lot of my clients, too, to give them that perspective, to say, if you have a lot of coworkers and maybe you're all unhappy together and maybe that's why you feel bad leaving, like, oh, man, we're kind of going through this storm together and I don't want to leave them high and dry in this terrible work environment or with this awful manager. But if you all band together and nobody leaves, it's like somebody's got to take the first step. And if you do it first, then someone else in the group might say, I don't have to be here either.
That's permission to pivot on a whole nother level.
You can give yourself and other people permission.
It's amazing. And I think the other point here is that I think we can sometimes overinflate I don't want to say that we're not important, because we're very important to an organization, but like, how important are you that if you think that you're some sort of like linchpin that like only you can make things operate smoothly? It's like having trust in other people's ability.
Right. And if you are that linchpin, that's a problem for everyone involved. The company shouldn't be that reliant on one person.
Even if the president dies, I'm not going to comment on my degree of opinion about that at the moment. But what I'm saying is, like, even if the president of the United States dies, there's like a contingency for the country doesn't fall into chaos because the leader dies. Like there are other people. That's what the part of being part of a team is, that no one is supposed to be that big of a deal, and that you can lean on other people. And if you're in an environment where that's not happening, that's actually a bad sign.
Yeah, totally.
So, okay, hit us with another, I was going to say fear, but also excuse, but they kind of end up being the same thing for why people don't give themselves permission to change or do something different.
Yeah, I think that another hang up, and this is kind of, I guess, in the context of career, is that you need to have some sort of side hustle or like personal brand in order to make a career pivot.
Oh, man, I have heard about this personal brand thing.
I have too. I've had multiple clients recently say this. That,
I have to do this. This is how you get a job now.
People have side hustles. I feel like it's not like chic if I don't have a side hustle now. I'm like, where did this come from?
A seriously overachieving culture. That's where it came from.
All right, Marissa, tell us more about this one and your experience.
This is so interesting because in my experience, it did help tremendously for me to have a blog in order to get a new job in a new industry. But I didn't start that blog for that reason. It was kind of a creative project. And what I think this actually represented for me was a tangible expression of the transferable skills and experience that I had to make a change, and kind of like indicating my interest. And I feel like there's so many ways that you can demonstrate the fact that you have these skills, these experiences, this interest in, whatever change you want to make, that you don't need to have all of this, you don't need to have a separate business or like a perfectly curated Instagram feed in order to show that.
Right. I think you can express a passion and interest for something without, like you said, having a freaking business about it or having a portfolio on some website that's beautifully crafted to prove it. Yeah. You can just say, this is a thing that I'm passionate about. Let me tell you about my passion for that. And if you combine that with transferable skills, which a lot of people don't realize that their skills can be transferred to another industry. They're like, well, I've only been a project manager, so I have to be a project manager in this particular field because nobody's going to take my, those are skills that you could use in so many arenas, but we pigeonhole ourselves. So between that and sharing a genuine passion for something, that's usually all you need to make a career shift.
Can we comment for a second on why we all feel like why people seem to be feeling the need to especially have a side hustle. I get the idea of the personal brand. I mean, for God's sake, I was sitting in a PR class 10 years ago in college hearing about how that was like all the rage. And apparently it hasn't died yet. But the side hustle thing is kind of new. It's newer.
Yeah.
Because it's only recently that I've heard clients start expressing this fear that they need to have a side hustle. So let me just, I'm going to like spit my truth here. I feel like the reason people often have side hustles is because they aren't getting paid enough to live in this world.
That's
where
exactly right.
I'm telling you, they don't want, not everybody wants a side hustle. They're doing it because the amount of money we're getting paid and the cost of living are not increasing at the same rate.
And student loans are higher than they have ever been before.
Right.
So like, people come out of school with so much debt that you have to have another gig sometimes just for that.
Why do we think people in the 50s didn't have a side hustle? Is because you could work at Sears and have a house and 3 children and a stay-at-home wife and still provide for yourself. Like, we do not live in that world anymore. So, okay, I'm just sorry. I had to rant about that for a second.
I completely agree. And I also think it's important maybe to point out the fact that society has somehow convinced us that you have to turn a hobby into a side hustle. And like, that's the only valid way to practice this hobby is if you're making money from it. And I think that that's also something that didn't happen 20 years ago.
Yeah. We've become even more obsessed with productivity. So doing something just purely because you enjoy it or it's a nice release after a long work week feels like a waste of time. So yeah, it's like, well, if I can monetize this, now I'm being efficient and productive. And that's going to be compelling to employers. It's like, for God's sake, can't we just do something for fun every once in a while?
Right.
Apparently not.
Right. Well, and this just gets back to, Kristen and I talk about this all the time, particularly when it comes to your passion profile. And if you're a thriver, you don't want to combine your career with your passion because it ruins the intrinsic value of it. But I think all humans have that to a degree, that there are some things you should just be doing for the pure joy of it because it refuels you, because it energizes you, because it brings you joy. And that if you try to make money from it, you may end up ruining the reason you're doing it in the first place. And I think that the whole I need to have a side hustle thing is a product of a culture that says money is the best way to measure value. And that, if you're doing something for fun, why not monetize it? Because it's obviously better, quote unquote, if you're making money. Well, who says? Why is that the rule?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the other part of this is, and I kind of want to bring up the stereotype, but I find that it's pretty accurate, is that a lot of men, for example, go after roles that they're not 100% qualified for, or maybe they don't have this experience to back it up, but they know it's something that they can grow into. Whereas so many women feel like they need to have all of these other ducks in a row or feel like they need to earn, they need to be able to have all of the qualifications. And therefore, that's maybe where a side hustle comes into play, is to like build those skills. I think that is something that holds us back as well, is that we feel like often we need to have all of the boxes checked off in order for us to make those changes, when that's not necessarily true.
That's not a stereotype.
So true. No, that's not a stereotype at all.
That's a cold, hard fact.
And I have worked with men and women, and you are absolutely right about that. That is the trend. And we could probably get into all the societal reasons why that's true. We don't need to do that. But I 100% believe that women feel like they have to overprove themselves in order to say, I deserve this and I am worth this. Whereas men inherently often have that feeling. It takes a lot less for them to feel like, I'm capable of that. Women have to say, I have to be so capable that I could do it in my sleep and prove it to myself and you that I've done it 18 times over before I could even consider applying for that job. And we hold ourselves back from trying things that we could be really good at, but maybe we haven't done it in that exact way before.
Exactly.
Okay, I know we're really harping on the whole side hustle thing, but apparently we have a lot of feelings about this.
All the feels.
I really, one last thought about this is that who says that if you love something, you should do it more? and more. It's almost like if I love it, then I should start a whole business around it. Or if I really loved it, I would want to do it all the time. It's kind of like a stay-at-home mom who's like, why am I not happy doing this? I really want a job, but I feel guilty because if I really loved my kids, I wouldn't want to work. That's not true. We know that that's stupid. We know that you can have value in various things and that you can find, you can have love and enjoyment and, infinite for your kids, but not want to be around them all day. And that doesn't make you less of a mom. And I think that this is also true of things you enjoy doing. And that if you really genuinely want to start a side hustle because you're a side hustler or because you have entrepreneurial energy and it excites you, great, do it. Like no one's telling you not to. This is really more for the people who feel like they should, but they don't really feel compelled. Just because you love something doesn't mean you have to do more and more of it. Like there is a point at which too much could take away from your enjoyment of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's funny that you're bringing this up today because I randomly bought a pair of earrings from someone at a maker fair here in Pittsburgh last week. And I was curious at how she made them. So I looked them up on Pinterest and I was like, oh, I can make that. And like, I have not even made them. And I'm thinking, oh, I should sell these. Like, why? I don't need to do that. I've not even made these. I don't even know if I will like it. So it's even things like that you don't even necessarily know if you like, and you already want to turn into a business because it's a good idea, quote unquote. Like, I think that there is something wrong.
So I 100% agree. And I'm actually now thinking about this from the flip side. So we're talking about people who, I love this thing, or I'm good at this thing, so I should turn it into a business, or I should pursue it in this particular way. And now I'm wondering, what about people who I want to pursue this thing and I would love to start a business, or I would love to get involved in this different kind of career thing, but I don't think I'm good enough at making the earrings, or I don't think I'm good enough at that to be able to pursue it.
Yeah, I think you've stumbled on another excuse people use to not pivot.
Totally. Yeah, that's one I've heard a lot of recently, especially with some of my clients, that I'm not good enough at this, or I don't know how, or I don't have what it takes to do that. I see everyone else around me and they just have this thing that I don't have. And it's sad because I think that, first of all, we're denying ourselves the fact that we have a capacity to learn, that things sometimes take time to learn and to grow into, to practice. And I don't know if it's just that as a society, because we have the instant gratification with social media and things like that, but we expect things to happen quickly or overnight, or if we don't have it inherently, that we just can't have it, or it's not ours. But I want to challenge that. I kind of want to put that, on its head, that you can learn these things, that you can grow into them, and you haven't really been able to see that for yourselves. Maybe you haven't practiced it, because when you have that belief, like, you're probably not going to go after it. You're probably not going to at least try and see, or maybe you tried once in the past and it didn't go so well, so you're afraid to try again.
This is reminding me of something I heard on a podcast. We might have mentioned this before, but if so, it's been a while, where we as humans, as a species, we used to live in tribes of, 100, 150 people. And in smaller groups like that, it was easy to be really good at something. It was easy to be like the go-to person.
You were the go-to basket weaver.
Right. Or archer or healer.
Right.
And because there weren't that many people, you were probably the best.
At something.
And now we have access to almost everyone on the planet. I mean, through the internet, anyone who is online is now someone who we can compare ourselves to. And there is no way you're going to be the best at anything.
Yeah, so we all are the worst collectively now.
So we don't believe that we're good enough anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one reason. But yeah, it is.
Right.
Like,
if you can find someone who's better at it than you wonder, should I even bother? Right. Or am I good enough? Because that person clearly is better than me.
Right.
And it kind of begs the question, like, what's that threshold? Like, what how will you know that you're good enough?
Yeah.
Can you measure that? Like,
well, and also, like, it takes out of the conversation that being good enough is something fluid. Just because you're not good at it doesn't mean it's not worth pursuing. It doesn't mean that you couldn't get better. I mean, everyone starts somewhere. And so I really think it's like, do you have an attraction to this? Do you feel alignment when you think of this thing? Are you energized by it? Are you excited? then the answer is, okay, then that's something worth looking into further. Maybe you don't have to commit to it completely, but you should at least give yourself permission to explore it. Saying I'm not good enough is a really kind of committed answer for something that is actually very changeable.
And most people who I coach very much want to learn and grow. They don't like feeling stagnant. So if you're already perfect at something and then you go do it, it's going to get really boring really quickly because you don't have anything left to learn or anywhere else to grow. So the fact that you're not 100% perfect at it yet might actually be great because now you get to learn and grow and expand as you're contributing whatever that skill is.
Yeah. And I think people in general love a story of growth. They love to see evidence of how someone has grown and evolved over time. It's kind of like looking at an artist's works over time and seeing how that artist has gotten better and changed their medium and like their expression of things. It becomes this entire body of work that maybe in the beginning that artist was discouraged by how much he or she didn't know, but towards the end, look at this entire growth we have documented. And I think that people are really attracted to people being willing to try and to fail and to mess up and to learn and grow anyway, and to share that with others. So it's really a win-win all around that you can be building a skill and sharing it with people and encouraging them to do the same.
I think that's a really compelling story to tell in an interview as well. If you're trying to change industries, to say, here's where I was and here is how I've grown and the failures I had along the way and what I learned from them and how I've become wiser and smarter and more accomplished because of it. And I'm going to continue that path. So if I don't know everything yet to do what I need to do here for you, I've proven that I can learn it and I can grow from it and I can become very skilled and very engaged because of that learning path.
This is reminding me of some conversations I've heard with like actors. And I can't remember who I'm thinking of, but it was someone who I think went to Juilliard or some like really impressive acting school. And they said, I can tell you right now, I was not the best. But I wanted it more than the other people. And they were like, there are people out there who are better comedians, like better dramatic actors who just couldn't take the lifestyle of what it requires to become an actor. It's hard. And they weren't saying that those people were not good enough. They were saying they just chose that this wasn't the life they wanted to live. And so they wanted to, pursue their talents in a different way. And it wasn't that I was so good. It was that I just was determined and I wasn't so opposed to the lifestyle that I knew I would have to live for a while in order to get here, like waiting tables and struggling and that kind of thing. So I really don't think it has much to do with talent or innate ability. I think it has to do with determination and patience and consistency and just effort, like sheer determination, really. I don't think you ever have to be the best at something in order to become great.
Absolutely not.
I think it's also important to note that nobody actually really knows what they're doing most of the time. That even the people who you assume are like who are in leadership roles or who are actors who are very successful on the page, like they probably don't really know what they're doing either. And they may also have their own doubts about their work. And so if we can all remember that we're all just trying to do our best, that, we can hold ourselves to a much more reasonable standard. I think that if we're just trying our best, then that's good enough. It's more than good enough.
Yeah. For anyone listening, you can trust us because we're coaches. So we get to hear the inner dialogue of so many people who on the surface might seem like they have everything together. Nobody knows what they're doing. This is something that we all share. We're all just bumbling through life trying to figure it out.
Pretty much everyone feels like an imposter almost all the time.
Yep.
That's just how it is. And one last thought about this. Haven't you ever worked in an office? Haven't you ever been around a bunch of people and like half of them are kind of adequate and not much more? They're like, they're sort of okay. They're unimpressive. And you want to know what? Someone's still paying them.
That's right.
Everyone is fantastic. Not everyone is amazing. And here's why that's cool for you. It means you can still get a job and not be the best of the best. And people will still find it valuable and want to pay you for it. And honestly, they might not know you're not the best of the best because often you're being hired to do something that you're just better at than them. And so they think you're super impressive or that you've got all the qualifications because to them, you do. This is all about like perspective. There is no one set definition of what it means to be good at something.
Not at all.
Right.
So, okay, Marissa, hit us with yet another excuse or fear that tends to, or hang up, I like the word hang up, around making pivots. There's a couple more on our list that I'm excited to talk about.
Yeah, I think one that I think has a lot of hold on us because there's some legit fear that's underneath it. And that is that, making a career pivot might mean going back to school or taking a pay cut and potentially going into debt. And that debt is bad.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I hear that one a lot too.
Yeah. Okay. So you and I coached around this together.
We did.
And I'm sorry. I've coached too many people to remember the details of this. This was like 2 or 3 years ago. So you must forgive me for this. But okay.
Unforgivable.
Are you willing to share your hang up around that?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
So for me, just to give some context, Rachel is my coach. We started back in 2016, which is crazy. End of 2016 into 2017. So it's totally fine that you don't remember from 3 years ago.
The exact specificity of your story. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the time, through working together, it finally came out that coaching might be something that I want to pursue. And so I was contemplating getting my certification, going to IPEC, which, spoiler alert, I ultimately did. But I remember, well, first of all, I have been in the experience of taking a pay cut from switching industries previously. So that was something I've experienced. But the idea of now paying for something like IPEC, which would, was a significant investment. It was a big deal. It was kind of like going to grad school. So it wasn't something that I just, had $100 and paid for. And it wasn't quite like that. So it was definitely something I needed to think about. And for me, I have the privilege of not really carrying any student debt. So I've kind of always had this belief around debt, that debt was bad and that you should avoid it at all costs. Right. And so I think that, in making this decision and trying to figure out, like, can I afford this? Can I manage to go into debt? And what will I do? I think that there's certainly some truth to worrying about how I would navigate with less money or how I would pay that debt back. But I think ultimately what was really underneath that was more of what it said about me to be somebody who was in debt or had to take a step back and go back to school in my career. Like, I'm not somebody who gets behind in my career. Like, I'm not somebody who carries debt. I don't go backwards in my paycheck. But the truth is I am someone who does those things. And so I think through talking with you, it actually reminded me to make kind of a shift. So instead of thinking of it as going backwards or that it was a bad thing, it was more about looking at the intention behind it and thinking of it more as making an investment in myself. So like, what would be possible for me if I ended up going back to school or, going through this certification program? What would be possible for me if I took a short-term sacrifice for my longer-term gain? And that made a huge difference for me, like thinking about the why. Wasn't going to debt through frivolous spending or like not thinking things through. Like, this is a very intentional decision. And it was because I was willing to invest in myself that I could have a greater opportunity on the other side. Now, of course, it does, sometimes mean that you have like a temporary suspension of certain luxuries maybe that you've gotten used to or a lifestyle that you currently have. You might have to change that. But I think another thing that you had asked me about was like, how much do you trust your future self to be able to navigate that?
Yeah.
And I am navigating that right now. And I know that I'm fully capable of doing that. So I think that was huge for me. It's a conversation I've had with clients as well around debt and around school and around kind of what feels like you're going backwards. If you can kind of think of it in a way that, is this intentional? And what is this going to bring me ultimately in the longer term? I think it can really relieve a lot of the stress and a lot of the pain that you might be experiencing in grappling with this.
I like the idea of reframing this as an investment for going back for school. And I'm also thinking that it's just as relevant when you talk about maybe you don't need to go back to school, but maybe you do need to take a pay cut to switch into a different field or a different expertise. And I've had clients who say things like, well, I don't want to go backward in my career, just like you were saying. And I don't want to start at the beginning again. And my thought about that is if you can start, maybe it's more at the beginning for a new industry, but if you can get paid to learn a new skill, that's really cool. Because yes, you could go back to school and pay to learn that. But if you consider, okay, maybe I have to take a pay cut, but I'm still getting paid to learn this new thing. And ultimately I will make as much or more.
Which is a lot better than going into debt.
Which is a lot better than going into debt. That's also a way of investing in yourself. And you can think of it not at all as a step backward, but as a way of getting paid to move forward in just a new direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a fear of the permanence of going backwards, quote unquote, in your paycheck or in your career path. But like you said, it actually could be the thing that propels you forward, and you might actually recoup that money and then some faster than you would have had you just stayed the course. Yeah, which was true for me.
I think that there's a bit of an obsession with linear thinking. So if I switch to this other industry or job, then I'm going to have to go backward. And then therefore I'm starting all over, quote unquote. And then it's going to take me even longer to make the amount of money I would have had I stayed in my original path. A, you don't know that. B, I think that you're acting as if your past experience counts for nothing. Like your age counts for nothing. Like the amount of years you may have put in working counts for nothing. And I don't think that's true. I think that sometimes, you might have to take a bit of a step back, but that doesn't mean that you then have to go through all of the steps that someone who was 22 starting out would have to go through, because I really believe, like we talked about earlier, a lot of the skills and the things you learn working are transferable and universal, and that those are things that you can't necessarily have if you're, 22, fresh out of college, starting in an entry-level job. So I think that we need to kind of back off of the idea that if you make a transition, it's all happening in this linear way, when really it doesn't. Most of our careers happen in weird loop-de-loops,
Totally.
And just out of order, and just it looks, there's no real predicting it. And so let's stop thinking like it's like a straight line, because it's not.
Yeah. I think you bring up a good point around with it being nonlinear, that with, for example, people worry about staying in a job for a certain amount of time or having gaps in their resume, because again, there's the assumption that it needs to look linear. It needs to be spaced out properly. You need to prove yourself, whatever it might be. But the truth is that we're pivoting all the time, and that careers these days don't look like a straight path. They just don't anymore.
No.
And that you're not going to get penalized for that.
No, we all seem to have this cultural imprint that is about 40 years outdated. And I think that we haven't yet caught up to the idea that most careers now don't actually look linear. They all look a little bit weird and a little bit unpredictable and interesting. I just think it's okay to have an interesting looking career now. I think we're allowed to, permission to say that's okay and to embrace that. Okay, so on this subject, there was another thing on our list that I really want to talk about, which is the one about, pivoting to a creative profession. I have a lot of clients, Kristen and I both have a lot of clients who are interested in maybe switching from something that's been more technical to something more creative, but they have a lot of fears and hangups about that. And I think that you have some things to say about that too. Like there's a point at which it's just too late, that's for the youthful people. I can't do that anymore. So what thoughts do you have about transitioning to creative work?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I hear this all the time. All my clients say this all the time too. I think that the word creative has become one of these challenging words for some reason. I think people feel like you either identify with it or you don't, or you have it inherently in you or you don't. And the truth is that everybody is creative. And so, even if you've started your career in a more traditional role, maybe in corporate or technical role, the idea that you can switch into a creative profession it's not a huge process like you might assume it might be, because you already inherently are creative. So truthfully, it's really about just adopting, that part of yourself and kind of owning it. But I think that people have this impression that, I think this also brings in the side hustle, the personal brand question again. Like, you need to be able to demonstrate that in very tangible ways. And that if you don't start off in one of these roles, it's really hard to illustrate that you are creative or that you're meant to be in a creative profession. And I just want to say, how true is that really? Like, who do you know that has made a change like that and switched industries? Look for evidence of how others have made big changes and how it's worked out for them. Because I think we can get so caught up in feeling like, oh, well, I haven't been doing it for 5 years, so I'm just going to count myself out from the get-go. And I think that you're really doing yourself a disservice by just staying where you are because it's easier or there's just not a lot of evidence or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that as well.
Well, I am forever telling my clients to find evidence of the things that they don't believe are true, because there is no way in the world you're the only person who decided, oh no, I'm a little older and I want to go into a creative profession, but clearly no one has ever done that before, so it's impossible. Like, that's just not true. You can absolutely find evidence of people who have made career shifts into all kinds of things at all ages. I think I was reading something recently about a woman who decided to go into aerial yoga at 80. So if she can do that, you can go into a creative field at 40.
Liz Gilbert writes in our favorite tome, Big Magic, that we can't go hardly a week without talking about. After 4 years, we're still talking about it.
I was waiting.
Yeah, right? Is that she talks about meeting someone who was getting a brand new degree at 90. And like between the ages of 80 and 90 had become like the world's foremost expert on a certain area of art, ancient art and architecture. And she didn't start until she was 80. So I really think that it's just a dumb excuse when you at like 25 or 40 or 65 even are saying, it's too late for me. Go on without me. I can't be creative now. It's too late. And I also think that I think that this challenges what the definition of creativity is, which is something that I know we've all talked about before, and it's not new, but I think that for some reason it keeps not sinking in, and we keep needing to remind people of it, that creativity is not necessarily like art and artsiness.
Right.
That's one version of creativity, but that you're probably a lot more creative than you give yourself credit for, and you've probably been, I don't know, coming up with creative solutions to problems in your job for the past decade. And that counts as creative experience that you can use to sort of point to when you're trying to make a transition into a more creative field.
Yeah. Creativity has literally no relationship to age.
No.
Whatsoever. In fact, I know a lot of people who have become more creative as they've gotten older because they've gotten more settled within themselves and they feel like they're allowed to express it more. So it is unrelated. And in terms of this age thing, I just want to harp on the fact that there is no such thing as being too old to make any kind of pivot. And I know this because I've had clients tell me that they're too old when they're 23. I've had clients tell me that they're too young when they're 40. It's like, what is the perfect age for this? That doesn't exist.
Right.
The perspectives are all across the map. And it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. If we could all hear each other's thoughts about this, we would realize nobody has any idea what the right age is. And so it must not exist.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that there's something else at the root of this question or this belief. And I think it kind of goes back to the idea around evidence of creativity. And I think that sometimes whenever you are not feeling or you're not looking in creative roles, so you're not actively being creative in terms of like, obviously, most people are creative in terms of problem solving and they don't even realize it, like you just mentioned, Kristen. But I think when you're out of the game, quote unquote, about being creative, you sometimes start to believe that you're no longer creative and that it's not within you. And you almost need that jump start to get momentum. And so to me, it's totally understandable why someone would feel like it's too late for them to go into a creative field when they have spent so much time not being creative, because you kind of just forget. You feel like you aren't capable of it anymore. I know that for me, whenever I am out of practice with something, such as if I haven't shared something on Instagram that was creative or interesting for a long time, I start to question myself and feel like I can't, or that I don't have it in me to write or to take pictures or whatever it might be. And sometimes I just need to be put into that situation so I can see for myself that, yeah, I have a well within me and it's never going to dry up. It just appeared that way to me. I just needed another opportunity. So if you're someone who's feeling like I just don't really have the capacity anymore like I used to, so, maybe that's why it's too late. Like, I promise you that if you put yourself in a posture where you can be creative, it will come.
Yeah. I think this gets down to the kind of sad truth that creativity thrives with space and boredom. And most of us don't have enough space and never allow ourselves to be bored anymore because we always have something to do. We have a phone. Like, that's it. You don't need to be bored if you have a phone. Yeah. And so I think that creativity is not something you have to wait around for. It's actually something you have to invite into your life. And again, you guys really need to be reading Big Magic if this conversation is resonating with you, because that's like the entire point of the book.
Our sponsor today is...
Liz Gilbert has made a lot of money off of us talking about her books, and I'm happy to give it to her.
Yes.
But yeah, speaking of Liz Gilbert, actually, this is a good example. I have a former client who recently went to Liz Gilbert's writing retreat in Hawaii. And like, she's not she's not a published writer. She's not doing it for career reasons. She was just doing it because she was like, hell yeah, I want to go to a writing retreat led by Liz Gilbert. Why would I not want to do that? It was just a choice. And she has children. Like, she had to like make arrangements for her, children to be taken care of. And her husband probably had to say this was fine in order for her to go do that. But like, she did it because it was awesome and because for the joy of it. And again, if you feel like you're creatively deprived and you can't get into a creative field, or you're not good enough to get into a creative field or make that shift, I think, like you're saying, it's likely because the juice has the batteries have kind of worn out. Yes. And you can recharge your batteries, but you can't wait around for someone to give you something that will recharge them. You might have to go do something or try something or create some space to invite it into your life and remind yourself, oh, wait, no, I can do this. I have what it takes. And that really might be all you need in terms of mindset in order to convince yourself, no, I could try that.
Yeah, I want to use what Marissa said and have people replace, I'm not feeling very creative with, oh, I'm just out of practice.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I'm just rusty.
Yeah, it's not gone. Just need to practice a little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I can practice in any way because creativity can show up in any number of ways. And I don't have to practice in a direct way. Like, maybe I'm interested in graphic design and I don't have a lot of experience. Well, flexing your creativity doesn't have to mean, taking a graphic design class right away. It could mean getting back into painting because you find that really creative and you used to do it a lot when you were a teenager and then you stopped. I think that it's like more about turning the juice back on and then letting that stream carry you rather than, trying to kind of like directly, I have to then go do this. Like, again, linear thinking. We can be circuitous about our thinking around this.
Definitely.
Okay. Oh my God, Marissa, I could talk to you about this ad nauseum, but I won't. I will not nauseate anyone with this conversation. Okay, so I want to give us plenty of time to talk a little bit more about you and what you do, and also you have a little something for people. Yeah. But first, I want to talk about your quiz because you have a career quiz, like we have a career quiz, but it's a little different. So for those people who are very familiar with the Passion Profile quiz, I'm sure they'll be interested in your quiz, but I want you to give them an idea of what it is and what it measures.
Yeah, absolutely. Fans of the Passion Profile quiz, this is another one for you. And I think it's especially great in light of the conversation that we've just had. For me, I had noticed a lot of patterns of career challenges that friends or clients and peers had expressed to me. And so I developed this career persona quiz to help people gain self-awareness around why they might feel the way they do in their careers, and then kind of some next action steps so that they can start to take some steps to find joy and fulfillment right now, even if they're in the midst of a career pivot. I think that we often convince ourselves that like we'll have those things whenever we get there, or like we have to do these big things, we have to make this career pivot, and then we'll be happy, and then we'll find joy and fulfillment. That's not necessarily true. So that's kind of why I created this quiz, so that you can find out if you're a visionary, a steward, a pathfinder, or an advocate, and what that means, and the steps you can take literally tomorrow to start feeling a little bit better.
Yeah. So anyone who's been feeling stuck or trapped, this is going to get you out of your rut.
Yeah. Or, I think who I really like the idea of making change immediate, as opposed to, one day you could implement this. It's like, even if you don't want to be at your job another 6 months, well, okay, if you're going to be there at least another 3 or 4 months, you deserve for it to be as okay as possible, and as even just as tolerable as possible would be better if you're miserable. So there's always something you can do. There's always some, again, shift or pivot you can make to make even just your perspective on something a little bit better. And often that's all it takes to make the daily grind way easier.
All right. Well, we will definitely link to this quiz in the episode description. Of course. So you can go over and take that.
ampersand.co/quiz.
Okay. And then this is a surprise. This is only for you guys if you've listened this far. I'm not even going to actually tease this in the intro, because I want to reward constancy and dedication. So Marissa decided to very generously offer a freebie to a handful of people who are currently listening. Yeah. So tell them what you've got for them.
Yeah, so to thank you for listening this far, I have a special gift for Clarity on Fire listeners. I wanted to offer 5 people a chance to hop on a free 45-minute coaching call with me, where we'll identify and we'll talk through what's keeping you, what are those hangups that you're experiencing, what's keeping you from giving yourself permission to make your own career pivot. And then we can get on the other side of whatever that fear or that belief is. So you can go ahead and book your free call at ampersand.co/clarityonfire. And if you're listening to this a little bit later, don't assume that all of the slots have been taken. Definitely make sure you visit that link and you see what's available.
I mean, check, but I know our people, and I know that those are going to go really fast. I mean, I'm not going to be as optimistic as you are about that, because
come on.
Kristen and I rarely, Kristen and I do give away free calls, but it doesn't happen very often, and there's always a special occasion. So obviously, guys, I know Marissa. I coached Marissa. She became a coach. I know that she's great. And so if you want to talk to a career coach, why the hell would you not do this? This is a once in a, maybe not lifetime, but at least once in a year opportunity.
It's a special occasion for me. So thank you for the opportunity to do that.
Okay. And so where else can they find you if they want to?
Yeah, if you want to. Again, my website is ampersand.co. That's just CO at the end. But I mostly hang out on Instagram. My handle is @Marissa Burdett. And I also have a Facebook community called Permission to Pivot. So you can find that by searching for Permission to Pivot in Facebook.
And a podcast called Permission to Pivot, though I know you are currently on hiatus. However, that doesn't mean that they can't go back and listen to every episode up until now.
Oh, they can go binge for sure.
First of all, I've been on her podcast.
Yeah, she's been on it twice. So episode 2, I believe, and 13.
Well, I've been on it.
You can find Rachel
as an interviewee, and then I interviewed you for your own podcast.
Yes.
So you can at least go listen to those episodes if you want to.
Yeah, especially the one we actually talk about my career pivot when I quit my full-time job. So that's episode 13. And Rachel, obviously, you guys know Rachel and Kristen are great interviewers. So it was really fun to have her on in that role as well.
Well, I mean, it was great. And I like turning the tables on you.
Yeah, I've done that in so many ways now.
I know. Well, okay. So thank you guys for sticking in with us for an hour, but this was so easy. This just went by so fast.
Well, and thank you for sharing, because I know a lot of our people have many of these beliefs. So thank you for being so honest about what you hear, because I know a lot of people relate to this conversation. So we appreciate it.
And go talk to Marissa. Be one of the 5. Go to the link in the episode description. And thank you, Marissa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Love you both.
All right. Love you too. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Sounds great. Bye.
Okay. So, what we always like to ask for every once in a blue moon, which
I think it actually happens more often than the occurrence of a blue moon?
Trying to be generous and act like we don't beg all the time for ratings and reviews, please.
I think that people know how often we do it if you listen to this podcast, which is probably at least monthly.
But
that's fine. I mean, listen, I don't put this thing together for free. Actually,
we do put it together for free.
No, yeah, well, no, it's not free for me.
No, that's true.
It's free for them. It's not free for me.
That's true. We pay to put this out there.
Exactly. I'm losing money. No, I'm not. I mean, no.
It probably all works
comes
out
in the wash. But anyway, do you know how you can send us a virtual tip? Is just by giving us a rating and a review.
And she means like the tip for a bartender, not like a tip of advice.
Okay. Yeah.
You could give us advice too if you want to.
I mean, I'm more interested in ratings and reviews. And if you've already done that, then reminder, we have a YouTube channel now. So if you haven't listened to our side chat from last Friday about what to do when you want to fix somebody, but you can't, you can go watch that on YouTube if you'd prefer.
Yeah, that one's an actual video
of us.
Where you can watch us talking at you.
Yeah, real titillating stuff. And also, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Even if you're not a big YouTuber, just do me a fave, okay? Just subscribe to the YouTube channel and I don't know, just don't get email notifications and it won't bother you, because the more subscribers we eventually accumulate, we can turn on that ad revenue and my dreams of being a famous YouTuber can come true. I also know that this will literally never happen, but it just helps more people find us the more, likes and views and subscribers you get.
Yeah,
so
it lets us find some more YouTube people who...
Those are two ways you can, do us a solid.
Yeah. Rating, review, YouTube subscriber. We would be eternally grateful.
Of course, you can find our YouTube channel just on YouTube by searching Clarity on Fire, or you can go to the link in the episode description.
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll see you on Tuesday with
a blog. Who knows? I have not looked up who it is, or even if it's old or new. I guess it's got to be old. I think it's my old blog. That's what I'm going to guess.
We'll see if you're right.
All right. Exciting stuff. Stay tuned. See you later.
Bye.